a triumph of knowledge over ignorance, sustainability over exploitation, and collective good over individual gain. May the eternal flame inspire our deliberations and illuminate the path of responsible business for generations to come. To capture the spirit of this landmark occasion, I would begin by invoking the profound insights from our Honorable Prime Minister. And I quote, "Today the world looks at the country's development in all sectors. India has become the fifth largest economy in the last 10 years. India's development has been achieved through the mantra of reform, perform and transform." At the Asian Leadership Forum, Seoul, our Prime Minister had also said that our footprint on earth must become lighter as our economic weight increases. These words do not merely inspire, they set a direction for governance and enterprise alike. They urge us to integrate environmental consciousness and social equity into the very fabric of our economic systems. Especially at this epoch-making moment when India is undergoing profound transformations amid an era of geopolitical flux, climate urgency, and evolving institutional norms. And therefore, the environmental, social, and governance framework serves as an enabling mechanism through which this national vision becomes a reality.
Honorable Minister of State for Corporate Affairs, Sri Harsh Malhotra ji, Sri Sanjay Sanyal ji, Member Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council, Ms. Sindhia, distinguished panelists, colleagues and delegates. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to this third edition of National Conference of Responsible Business Conduct hosted by Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs under the aegis of Ministry of Corporate Affairs. This is the third in series, and Garima ji has set the tone that why we have chosen this time. The topic is integrating ESG for Viksit Bharat. So what I am going to cover, there is a lot of misconception about the disclosure framework, whether it is required, whether it is not required. I joined Ministry of Corporate Affairs in 2016, and then we got a letter from Secretary External Affairs that we have to come with some kind of a write-up, some kind of our national framework, how we are going to address ESG framework. That time it was called Business and Human Rights. So all are connected. So what I am trying to do is trying to put a perspective that SDG is a national commitment. And similarly, at the Human Rights Council, we have among the guests Dr. Bala Bhaskar. He has just retired as an ambassador of Norway. So we had a lot of discussion and deliberation. That time we were hesitant because we were working on ease of doing business. We were thinking whether this kind of a reporting will increase our compliance burden. Then we had a lot of discussion and we realized that there is a need. We have to develop a business case. Then we started interacting with sustainability officers of big 4-5 companies, and all of them, they said whenever they are going to any developed world, they have to come with non-financial reporting. So we realized, and they said that there is a lot of pressure since there is no framework. There are all international framework, and we don't have anything where we can, because each country development path is different. We are a unique country. Our development path is different from the West. So whether we have to adopt, there are lots of framework. All of you are aware. TCFT is there, GRI is there, IR is there, ISO 26000 is there. So they were lost. So I realized in the ministry that we have to do something. We have to come up something which will have a business case, which will help our corporates, which will help the professional to understand what needs to be done. So this is the origin. And many countries in the Western development, even the Malaysia, Indonesia, and emerging economies, the MEA is the forefront in developing this kind of a framework because they are at the international forum, they understand the challenges. So what I am trying to do here, I am saying that there is a business case, and when I was the chairman of BRSR, some of the members, those who were part of BRSR, we were discussing, we are not here to increase the compliance. We are here to make a business case, and the business will work if it is related to their profit. We have to calibrate our approach in such a way that business should not take it something coming from a regulator and trying to impose it. So at the time when BRSR report was finalized in 2020, CV was quick enough because CV had already implemented BRR report, which was published by the ministry and IICA in 2011. So they had the background of top 500,000 companies, somewhere they were reporting non-financial reporting. So they made it for those 2,000 companies with exemption. They are already reporting. This report is slightly different. Earlier reporting was more of a subjective. This reporting is both subjective as well as quantitative. It can be measured. So that way it has come. So we were interacting with some of the students, those who are undergoing the course, ESG course, 6 months with IICA. They were asking, so I will answer 5-6 questions. We have panel here. Honorable Minister was last year also graced occasion by profession. He understands the role of non-financial reporting, and that's why he is always giving us guidance how to navigate in a difficult terrain where we should be seeing that we are not imposing compliance for the business. At the same time, we are nudging business to come up to the challenges, whatever is required to get the access to capital, access to market. We have with us Sanjeev Sanyalji. He is a thought leader within the bureaucracy. He has, due to his intervention, many reforms we have seen within, and he is a champion of light touch approach. So he will give his own perspective. Then we have Ms. Cynthia from UNICEF. We are working on this very closely. So I will cover 5 things. Disclosure. So disclosure has improved a lot in the sense right now there is a disclosure where we are trying to capture under ESG, and ESG we are trying to capture whatever government of India has mandated, nothing more than that. So under E, whatever government of India's policy is there, we are trying to measure on some of indicators. Then S, whatever government of India policy is there. So ESG is nothing but whatever government of India policy is there, how the business are responding. G is the governance, and if you map ESG with SDG, there is a complete convergence. So this is some way ESG approach is how the business, how the private sector is responding to the agenda of the SDG, because as a country we are committed, there is a role of government, there is a role of business. So disclosure is, it has improved a lot. Brainwashing, this will happen because we have to develop the ecosystem, and the ecosystem development, there are very good practices. There may be challenge, some of them, because professionals are not there. Data point is a problem. So in disclosure, what is the challenge? Challenge for us as a group is to decide how to capture the data, how the data can be verified. Even SEBI is studying. That's why this year SEBI had wanted to make it mandatory for value chain also. But SEBI has said we have to further way, it will be voluntary. Because we have to see the readiness of society, because value chain is a big issue. If you want to capture value chain on that, but value chain is required to be done, because if you have to develop this country from 5 trillion to 10 trillion, that is our ambition. Some way we have to get the access to capital, access to market, and we have to also join supply chain. So we have to do in such a way that this transition should be gradual. It should not give a break. It should not emerge in a situation where business find it difficult to implement. So SEBI was mindful of the fact. That's why this year they have allowed. SEBI has also come up with the framework of how the BRSR core, BRSR is there. BRSR core is trying to capture on some key indicators so that comparison can be easy. So that also is a gradual approach. There is another question yesterday, many of the participants, those who are here, they were asking, can we make it mandatory for a small business? So my answer would be, the business knows what is good for them. Our job is to give the framework. I have been told there is a data. If it has been made mandatory for 1,000 companies, there are many more companies, they are reporting on voluntary basis.
Partnering us since many years to take these agenda forward.
Honorable Minister Malhotra, Mr. Mr. Sanyal, Mr. Singh, Professor Dadich, all of our partners from across the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, IICA, and our partners from across the business, academic, civil society sectors, and international organizations. Namaskar. I want to start on behalf of UNICEF commending IICA for convening this august group. We're thrilled to be back because of the opportunity. It's becoming a much anticipated event for the opportunity to exchange ideas, challenge perspectives, all with, as we heard at the opening, challenging each other to move towards change and solutions. Countries, India, all have choices. And India's government and private sector have decided that aligning ESG with its developmental agenda is something they want to do. Looking at Viksit Bharat, that bold agenda and goal, India has decided, let's make sure we're aligned with ESG so it is a sustained journey and sustainable when we reach it in 2047. I may have asked this last time I was here. Why are we here to talk about children and their rights and their well-being? Isn't this a meeting that talks about business productivity, strong economic growth? And UNICEF would say absolutely. And when we look and think about ESG, UNICEF often has a mantra, ESG without children, without that C is incomplete. And when something is incomplete, it's not very stable. When we look at the environmental horizon, the degradation, the challenges around climate change, children are often the first and the most affected. So 3 things to just paint what that looks like. Today, 1 billion children live in areas that are extremely likely to have at least one extreme climate event. At least 40 million children every year are out of school because of a climate event. And killer childhood diseases are on the rise, like diarrhea and malaria due to climactic impact. Economists, business leaders, decision makers know that when you have such instability that creates impact negatively on health, learning and education, on safety, it's not good for business. So I think it's important when we say it has an important impact on children, that's how stark it is. But UNICEF and I did not come here to bring doom and gloom. We came because we have been proud to be working with IICA for the last 7 years and with many of you about things that we're doing and we can do more of, changes we can make. And 3 fundamentals: having a strong policy framework, making sure we have tools that take that policy and put it into practice, actions, and then partnership. Everyone across all sectors has a role. This isn't just India's challenge. We're looking around the world, UNICEF, and finding lessons. In nearby Nepal, they have decided that their nationally determined contributions, what we call NDCs, they've embedded children into that. So Nepal has NDC 3 that looks at vulnerability for children. And that's a policy as well as putting practical actions in Nepal and then partnerships across all sectors. But bringing it back and closer to India, if we look at the policy framework, India has created a global model. And that framing is important. Again, to build on it, the National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct. That's meaningful. India has volunteered that. Businesses are looking at how to bring those rights, that well-being, that good conduct into business. Secondly, the business sector is applying business responsibility and sustainability reporting. Sometimes we forget what it stands for. We often talk about BRSR. That is a systemic way that businesses are reporting on sustainability and holding each other to account. That policy framework is extremely important on which to build. But it's not meaningful if it's not in practice, reaching real people with real solutions. So looking at some practical solutions, UNICEF has proudly worked with IICA and other partners to create e-courses on ESG that embeds children's rights and children's perspectives. Putting in people's hands, this is the type of thing that you should think about, that you should consider, that you can do to make ESG truly inclusive and sustained. IICA and UNICEF have been working on family-friendly policies, enabling businesses to think through how do we create those policies that create and generate productivity. Around the world, we see again and again family-friendly policies help create healthy families, which creates productivity, loyal employees, and then healthy families and children who grow to be the next buyers, employers, and employees of the future. They work. Finally, what does this mean for all of us? Who are the partnerships? It's all of us in the room, and I would challenge us to also look and work with young people themselves. Young people are not only the ones who may be impacted the most, but have an opportunity to learn with us as we try to find new solutions. And I applaud the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which is innovating into action the Prime Minister's internship scheme, aiming boldly for 10 million young Indians to be placed in internships across 500 of the country's top corporations. This will be a two-way street. They will see what it's like working in corporate industries, but corporations will also see the types of skills that young people have, that they may already realize that they can enhance further or that may be missing. And we create this incredible dynamic that I believe the Prime Minister's idea envisioned. A second way that we are tangibly engaging young people is UNICEF's Yuva program. Created a platform inspired by the Prime Minister's mission life. We created the Merry Life app. It's a place where young people could go and learn about climate change, sharing knowledge, but also a place where they could share actions they've taken, how they've worked or how they haven't worked. UNICEF launched that with the government of India, and less than 2 years later, there have been over 20 million pro-planet youth-led actions for climate. So let me end where I began, which is keep in mind that ESG without that important C for children is incomplete. And it's like a stool that it's not quite balanced. It's not as stable. And how do we make sure that we look at these policies that enable us to be inclusive for children because it creates present strength but also future? How do we put that into practice with a number of the guidelines, trainings, and actions? And then how do we use partnerships? And with that, thank you, and we look forward to the lessons.
Thank you, Ms. Cynthia, for again bringing into focus the intergenerational lens that must guide responsible business conduct in the years to come.
Honorable Minister of State for Corporate Affairs, Shri Harsh Malhotraji, Madam Cynthia McCaffrey, Shri Gyaneshwar Kumar Singh, Director General and CEO of the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, Dr. Garima Dalij, Associate Professor and Head of the School of Business Environment at the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, I am particularly pleased to be here at the National Conference on Responsible Business Conduct, because this is an issue actually that I have been working on for some 30 odd years. Many people may not realize this, but actually almost 3 decades ago I began to work on issues relating to put valuations on environmental, social and other indicators which are usually looked on, at least at that time, in very subjective sort of ways or in physical terms. And some of us began to argue that maybe we should attempt to put valuations on them. So some of the very early papers on things like green GDP, etc., were written by me when I'm in my 20s and early 30s. And I co-authored with people like Pavan Sukhdev, Rajiv Kumar, Hari Priya, Goody Media, who have all gone on to make a name for themselves in that field. I, of course, remained in the field of finance and later in the field of policy making. But it is an issue that I have been engaging with for a long, long time. And I have to say that while I am pleased that this line of thought has gathered now almost a movement, I've also been somewhat concerned about the direction that it has taken in many ways. So I'm going to talk about some of the things I'm concerned about. This is I'm saying this up front because you may think that because I'm going to be quite critical about some of the things, that I actually have a problem with environmental, social and governance norms. I don't, as I said, I am actually have been at the forefront of this for many years and have written some of its foundational papers. But as I said, I will be critical because I think if we don't think about these issues, we run the risk that this whole thing will fall apart. And we have reached that point that rather quickly, in fact, faster than I thought, where we have a moment of reckoning in many of these issues. So where did this ESG sort of effort come from? After all, people have been talking about responsible governance, environmental issues for thousands of years. This generation is hardly the first to think about it. You can see these issues even reflected in some ways in the writings 2,300 years ago of Acharya Kautilya in the Arthashastra. The questions that I will now raise will relate to the way it has now developed. But basically this particular round of thinking about this arose about 20 years ago, around about 2006 or so, from a series of papers that the UN came up with on the need for environmental, social and governance norms of some sort. And initially, this term ESG, etc., were sort of an academic sort of term that was being thrown around. But a decade later, it was taken up by mostly think tanks, NGOs, mostly in the North Atlantic, and it began to organically develop some hard edges to it. And before we knew it, ESG became something that was a set of supposedly globally accepted norms began to emerge. Now what is important about this is that by the time this became kind of getting hardwired into policy in places like the European Union, it had not yet been discussed with anyone. It was just turned out the way it was, without a wider discussion, getting hardwired into multilateral guidelines, into country policy, and even into things that were being imposed on the rest of the world by entities like the European Union through CBAM. Now we have to be very careful about this for a number of reasons. I know there are many academic studies that have talked about how ESG type companies, the companies that do well in ESG, turn out to give, in the longer run, better shareholder value as well. Now there are many methodological problems with it. So first of all, you should take them with many pinches of salt. But my first problem with this whole thing is the following, which is a philosophical one, which is that once you convert an indicator into a target, it stops being an indicator. As a policymaker, and those of you who even run large companies will know that once you convert an indicator into a target, you will get credentialism, tokenism, you will see the system being gamed, you will get greenwashing, and there is no point in saying that, oh, we'll do a slightly better job than the previous generation. This is almost an inevitable outcome of this line of thought. I'm saying this because if you begin to make this anything other than voluntary, you will get this. You will end up with tobacco companies with the best ESG ratings, which has already happened, by the way. It's not something I'm just making it up. And the reason this happens is that the logic of turning an indicator into a target almost always leads you here. I know because, as I said, I created many of the methodologies that are used. I know that when you are dealing with some highly subjective things and trying to put numbers to them, it will only work if you are doing it without forcing it, because the moment you do that, there are incentive structures of the agencies, consultants and others who very quickly capture these spaces becomes misaligned. So this is a major issue that we need to think about and simply cannot brush under the carpet by saying, oh, we will do better than the last one. Second, and this is a major issue that we have, is that a lot of this has already been captured by essentially North American NGOs, think tanks and such, and consultancies.
And this is a big problem, because very quickly, this also we found it's not just about their geographical location, but the fact that they are essentially end up being ideologically captured, or captured by corporate interests or by geopolitical interests. I will illustrate this with the example of something where ESG-like thing has existed now for some time, which is in sovereign ratings. So many of you may not realize, first of all, the sovereign ratings worldwide are essentially done by 3 sovereign ratings that are accepted: Fitch, S&P and Moody's, all in the North Atlantic. And 20% odd of the weightage there is given on things which are considered governance type points and indices that are here. So I began to look into how did they give this 20% weightage, how did they derive it? And I found that if you dig a little bit, you will end up with something called the World Bank's governance indicators. So I went to their website and dug through it. Now I thought that maybe the World Bank spends a great amount of thought about how to choose indicators to put in there. But then at the bottom of that page, I discovered that in fact the World Bank didn't run it at all. It was run in fact by 2 independent researchers over which the World Bank took no responsibility. They were both associated with USAID, and effectively what they were doing is that they were sticking on that World Bank page friends and family and ideological co-travelers and their indices. So what did you end up with? You ended up with VDEM for democracy. This is a Stockholm-based think tank called Varieties of Democracy Indices. There was Freedom House and so on and so forth. So I went and looked at them. And once I dug into them, I discovered that almost all of them were funded by these 5 agencies. 1, Soros's Open Society, Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, USAID, and certain European agencies. Many of them, by the way, had funded each other as well into this huge network. And so basically what you had is that the views of a tiny cabal was being reflected and essentially given legitimacy. It's a form of legitimacy washing through the World Bank's world governance indicators that in turn were being hardwired into the sovereign ratings. So I raised questions about it. I wrote extensively about it. Many of you may have even read these newspapers. And ultimately, last year, the World Bank was forced to actually investigate the matter, and they agreed with the points I was making. So now the World Bank is relooking this whole world governance indicator framework and taking responsibility for it. Because earlier when I questioned these indicators, all they would do is send me off to these 2 random independent and entirely sort of unsupervised 2 researchers who I will not name, who were doing whatever they wanted. And yet they had their political and ideological views whitewashed on the World Bank's website. So now the World Bank is doing something about this. But I'm saying this because if you are not careful, you will have the same problem. Mr. Soros's views will essentially be the one that the world will use. None of you will know them. But as a result of their control over the frameworks, we will end up perpetuating into every national policy the views of this small cabal, which of course they are manipulating for their own geopolitical, financial and ideological agendas. Next, and the third point, that if we are not careful, we will also end up with another problem, which is that you will end up with either a network of consultancies or government officials themselves creating a system of rent seeking and frictions to the way corporate function. And this is already an issue. You already have a situation where the European Union effectively uses CBAM, which is derived from the ESG framework, essentially to create non-tariff barriers for countries like India to export into the European Union. This is, by the way, a major discussion point in our negotiations with on a free trade agreement with the European Union.
Shri Sanjeev Sanyal. 2025, it is my privilege to again extend a warm and respectful vote of thanks on behalf of the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs. We express our deepest gratitude to Honorable Minister of State for Corporate Affairs and Road Transport and Highways for delivering the keynote address to this gathering and reaffirmed the government's unwavering commitment to foster responsible business conduct in every sphere. Our sincere thanks to Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, Member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister for his special address. So your perspectives has also provided a way forward task to all of us. We are also grateful to Ms. Cynthia McCaffrey, UNICEF representative to India, highlighting the importance of aligning ESG goals with child rights, community welfare and inclusive development. A special word of thanks to Shri Ganeshwar Kumar Singh, Director General and CEO, for his leadership and steering IICA's mission to integrate and keep the momentum alive of ESG into the India's corporate landscape through action, research, capacity building and policy support. To all our dignitaries, partners and delegates, thank you for being part of this important inaugural session. Your presence reflects our shared resolve to build a responsible, equitable and sustainable business ecosystem. We also acknowledge the invaluable support of our parent ministry, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and our partners, UNICEF India, ACCA, Partners in Change, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, NSC India Limited, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, Access to Nutrition Initiative, International Labour Organization, and Responsible Business Alliance for walking alongside us in this journey. Integrate ESG for Viksit Bharat. May I request the dignitaries on dais just to come forward for a group photograph